some of you as to what you've been talking about at your tables, or some of you might want to have raised questions which to put to some of the presenters who spoke earlier. So over to you. And when we conclude this session, we will have the votes, the results of the vote that you made earlier. Anyone who wants to start? Tom, please. Could we get the mic? Sorry, where's the mic? Oops.
Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you.
Just 2 points. Tom Burke, the Bill of Rights, it suggested that we work on that. My limited experience in the civil service before I retired, the drafting of a bill is a highly specialised job. Nobody here, with the possible exception of Art, depending on his experience, and yourself, and to a lesser extent politicians, would have any expertise in drafting a bill. I don't think it's one we should consider. And if I can speak for Alban, who had to leave, he considers that to deal with economic, social and cultural rights, that would take a year in itself. So for that reason, I suggest that also be eliminated consideration. Thanks very much.
You're, just to be clear, what you're saying is it? I don't know whether it's your opinion or the view of the table.
No, that's my opinion.
Your personal opinion that the Bill of Rights is too complex for the convention and the economic.
And Alban was speaking in relation to the item 2, economic, social and cultural rights. Yeah, but he had to leave.
Comment. Okay, fine.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. Comment, yeah, Alan.
Hi, Alan Green. I just want to respond to Tom's comment there. I don't think we should actually be eliminating any topic because we deem it to be too complicated or take too long. In fact, I think if something is so complex and deemed by the membership to be of great importance, we should really put forward a very strong recommendation to the Oireachtas to extend our mandate and give us time, or give a subsequent convention or some other body the time to properly debate this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alan. I mean, this is the purpose of this session, to get ideas and get an exchange of ideas. David, John, please.
Hi, I'm John Kenny, and just on the fourth one, political and institutional reform, I feel that with a lot of the topics that we've discussed so far, whether in the first one in the presidential and in the electoral system and all those that have come beforehand, that it seems a lot of the debate and discussion that we've had from those have suggested looking at further institutional and political reform. So I think the topics within that, especially the first 3 listed, could be well worth discussing in light of what we've previously looked at in our previous reports. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, was there somebody there? I think it was somebody there, Amy, beside you, and then we'll go to John afterwards immediately. Yeah.
Thanks, Chairman. Andy Kinsella. 3 quick points. Our table felt that we should remain very focused on concluding our existing mandate, and that while there are lots of other potential AOBs, which are all very important things, we shouldn't get deflected by it, and that others may take the opportunity to talk about the future and future conventions without necessarily concluding as best as we possibly can our existing order of business. Just a brief question to Suzanne, if I may, and I should also say I thought all the expert comments and presentations were excellent. I'm just not entirely sure where a Bill of Rights fits into a kind of a pecking order. I understand a constitution and legislation. Does a Bill of Rights carry more importance or greater weight, and where does it fit into our legislative process? So that's just a brief question. And the only thing I would say than the last one, I was intrigued to replace the Irish Constitution with a Swiss-style constitution. Now, trying to avoid the obvious puns on Swiss-style, I was interested to know what Swiss-style constitution might look like.
Okay. So would you like to deal with that question, or maybe both questions while you're at it, if you want to deal with the second one as well? If not, we'll get somebody else to deal with the second question.
Thanks. Thank you, Andy. I think that the submission, as I understand it, before the convention, is that there should be a Bill of Rights inserted into the Constitution, and that would give the rights such that they might be constitutional standing, which would give the courts the possibility of listening to claims that a particular right has been infringed, and ultimately the possibility of striking out legislation, for example, for being, in contravention of the Constitution. Whereas if you have legislative rights or rights in legislation, such as we have in the European Convention on Human Rights Act, it doesn't have the same force or standing, and the courts are not going to... No, the European Convention on Human Rights Act is not part of the Constitution. The submission that's before you is that there should be, in other words, constitutional effect given to other rights, such as might be, debated and discussed. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch your second question.
It was a question of should we have a Swiss-style constitution? My understanding is that would move towards a lot more use of direct referendums. Isn't that correct? David, you'll deal with that.
I mean, the Swiss-style constitution relates to a couple of things. It could be to do with whether Ireland might become a federal system with more power of the states. But I think when people talk Swiss-style constitution, the shorthand is they're talking about direct democracy, which you have already voted on. You've already made a recommendation that there should be direct democracy in the sense of the right of citizens to petition for referendums. So there's already been discussion of that particular issue.
Can we move to John, please?
John Crotty. I just want to ask, we've been talking at our table about issues that we would like seen addressed either by review constitutions or conventions. So we've picked out about 3 or 4 items. Are they going to be picked up by the convention secretariat and reported on?
Yeah, we will be capturing from the discussion around the table what has been discussed here today.
But is that just in a general discussion, or are you going to take the notes from the note takers?
We'll take the notes. But I mean, the point is that, in a way, all of this morning, the regional meetings, they're all, in a sense, going to develop a kind of a large menu of options. And ultimately, it'll be for the convention to vote on prioritising those options, and that will inform our agenda for the next 2 meetings in February.
Thank you.
Thank you. At the back there, is it Finbar? Yeah, thank you.
Finbar O'Brien. On behalf of our table here, table 12, that we were talking about time being so limited, that a number of issues, mainly to do with the family and child affairs, with bringing in child-friendly bill, looking after the rights of the family and the Bill of Rights for the people. That's what was coming up here at the table mainly, and the main reason for that is because time is so limited.
Yeah.
That we kind of brought it down to those items, and that's what we're more concerned about here at our table.
Okay, thanks very much,
Thanks.
Finbar. Robert, please.
Robert Dowds. My table has asked me to say that we strongly are of the view that the environment should be one of the topics. The other thing I want to point out is Luke Boyle on my left suggested that really it's best to have a vote as to which items we should discuss in terms of priority, so that if there are just 2 meetings, at least the 2 topics that are most demanded by the convention are discussed.
Yeah, but that's precisely what we're going to do. I mean, I think I explained earlier, when we finish the round of regional meetings, we will have a listing of issues and options, and the convention as a whole will vote on those. So in a sense, you will be setting your own agenda for the 2 meetings in February. David, please.
Thank you, Chair. David O'Reilly. I think the electorate certainly gave the signal that in terms of Seanad reform, they want that to be the case, but I would personally feel that 1 or even 2 meetings probably wouldn't be enough to cover that topic. So I was wondering, is there potential to request an extension of our mandate to cover Seanad reform?
Well, there's the potential to request anything. But I think clearly the government, I would think if there were to be another convention, a mandated convention, I would imagine that broadly the same process will take place as for the last one, that the government would maybe take account of what the convention itself says. It would also, I'd imagine, consult with the opposition parties, and on that basis of consultation come up with an agenda. But it would be up to the government to decide whether or not it needs another convention, and if it needs another convention, what agenda to give it. This side, over here, is there? Richard. Sorry, Richard was first. I didn't see it. Which Richard?
Richard at the end.
Oh, Richard at the end. Sorry.
My name is Peter Halligan.
Sorry, no, it's not Richard.
You just want to echo what was said around the table a small bit, that there's so many issues, but we have very little time, and just to focus on maybe one or two issues, because any change to the Constitution is an important change, and it's a big change. So having 4 or 5 different issues that we just skirt along in a small way doesn't give any of it the weight or the discussion or the consideration that it really deserves. So as a proposal from the convention, maybe just 1 or 2 issues over the course of the next 2 meetings would be, I think, fair and reasonable. Thanks.
Yeah. I mean, that is the dilemma that we face as a convention. The number of issues we wish to treat and then agree on those. And on this side, is it Paula? Yeah, thanks.
Hi, Paula Sheridan. While we did discuss all 6 options, our table felt the most important to discuss were the economic, social and cultural rights, political and institutional reform, most importantly the Shannon and local, and the family, specifically more inclusive definition and the de facto family. However, we also had a discussion about the preamble, religious oaths, affirmations instead of oaths, and the environment, especially looking at the South African Constitution.
Okay, thanks, Paula. I think Sheila's next, and then Terry.
Pardon my nervousness, Sheila Canavan. I would just like to try and kill 2 birds with 1 stone. This is a personal opinion, that the convention could explore the idea of bestowing the trusteeship of the environment on the office of the presidency.
Okay, interesting idea. Terry, please.
Terry Cormican. I'd just like to say, on behalf of a few people at the table, that we consider the economic, social and cultural issue to be high on a priority list, based on all 6 are important, but this particular one has life and death effect, whereas the other 5 issues would not probably cause a death or could cause a death, whereas that particular one could. So basing the 6 items on life or death issues, the economic, social and cultural rights one probably would come out on top.
Okay, thank you. John, Amy, could you bring the mic to John here, please?
I would certainly like to, John Lardner, I would certainly like to see the inclusion and the prioritization given to the environment. For in my view, if we don't have an environment for our grandchildren and their grandchildren, we have no human rights. It becomes a problem. We don't have housing resources. We have no resources. I think it should be prioritized. And just a question in observance of how we're going. We have 2 meetings in 2014, and we make a vote between now and then. How will that vote take place if we don't vote here together?
Well, I think it's not really appropriate that we vote today. I think people need a bit more time to in a sense, take in what they heard today, reflect on it, maybe look at Peter's document, which shows as well where the other how things have been dealt with. But also, you know, a number of you are going to be at regional meetings around the country, and I think in the course of thinking about it, maybe attending meetings, you'll be in a better position to vote at the beginning of beginning of December. But that vote will take place by virtually. We won't be reassembling to vote. We will be voting online, and but we'll be doing it, as I said earlier, in consultation with the steering group. So we'll meet with the steering group in advance of actually finalising, if you like, the ballot paper for the convention to vote at the beginning of December. John, I think, was next.
John Connolly from Dundrum. I think our hands were uncuffed with the result of the referendum on the Senate. And essentially, before that vote from the people, the sovereign vote of the people, we were really disbarred from discussing anything relative to it. Now it appears as if the Senate is going to be with us as a constitutional body for a long period of time. It's quite unlikely to be challenged in our lifetime again. Would it not be an interest of this constitutional commission to outline what we as a body might think would be an appropriate way for the Senate to operate in from election purposes, its overall makeup and the shape of its constituents, and also a direction as to what they might apply themselves to, whether it would be EC law, whether it would be these issues that are on our constitutional programme for evaluation this weekend. Because they're going to be with us now for a long, long time, and I think no one, we were deprived the opportunity of making adequate submissions during our lifetime, and the electorate was all in favour of there being a possibility of discussing things referable to the Senate's function. I think we have that opportunity now, and I think if we devoted one session to the Senate, it would be not time ill spent.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I would just note that in the wake of the referendum result, I think the Taoiseach has gone and spoken to the Senate. He's also, I think, undertaken to speak with party political leaders, opposition leaders, on what could be done about Senate reform without a referendum. So, I mean, there will be certain amount of things will be happening in that regard anyway. But at the end of the day, you know, you as a group are going to vote on what your priorities are for the February meeting, and just listening to the diversity of views around, the only way we're going to establish a priority ranking is indeed such a vote. Deirdre.
Hi, Deirdre Donaghy, and these are, I think, hopefully comments of the whole table. Things we were saying was, one of the main things we were interested in was looking at effective oversight of the government. So that might take in Shanad or Doyle reform or Office of the Controller and Auditor General. So that was the main one that we had an interest in. And also just as in terms of whether to do a lot of issues or a small number, we were kind of saying we'd rather do 2 things and do them well than try and do 10 things but only skim them.
Yeah, thank you. Seamus, please.
Thanks, Chairman. Just, I suppose, as a broader point really about it, it seems to me that the work of the convention, you know, considerable work has been done to date, and specific recommendations have been put up to the government for the consideration. And ultimately, they will decide whether constitutional amendments, A, are needed, or B, will be brought forward within their lifetime. And whilst, you know, the ongoing work here is vitally important, and there's a certain momentum inevitably is in situ with the work of conventions such as this. Nonetheless, I think the work of the convention can't really be considered in isolation. The government, I'm sure, they have a legislative programme. There are areas that they regard as being of greater priority than other areas. And quite clearly, if the convention here feels that a specific referendum should be held in an area that perhaps the government don't regard as being a priority at this point in time, it may be a priority down the road. I think it's important to consider the work and the eventual decision that's taken about this matter in that context. And I respectfully suggest that perhaps the advice of the government, the Minister for the Attorney General, or whoever is going to recommend in relation to this, that their advice be sought as to what areas they think the convention should, in the short and in the medium term, focus on.
Okay.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you very much indeed. Angus, please.
Angus Osnoddig. We had quite an interesting debate on our table, wide range and across I think every one of the 6 issues. But there was one particular that struck me. It would probably fall under the economic, social and cultural rights, which I think should be the discussion over 2 weekends. One of the things that we discussed was the right to housing, right to a home. And it's a huge issue at the moment, and kind of we had the discussion. We have no legal experts at the table, whether that's interfered with by the right to property in the Constitution, and that we'd have a discussion of that. And I think if we took that line, then those type of issues, they're the type of issues you'd have in the Bill of Rights. They're the type of issues which are listed in the document at the back, kind of which the other bodies have already looked at, the consultative committee. So we're not starting afresh. There are documentation there could be circulated early enough for everybody here to look at, and then you could bring in your expert opinion at that stage.
Okay, thank you. Joan, please.
Hello, my name is Joan Stewart, and I feel that, yes, it's very important that we understand that the government have to take a look at all the items that we discuss. But I think it's equally important that the government have to listen to the people of Ireland. And I'm a citizen of Ireland, just a plain person here with lots of other people, and feel that it's really important that the message sent back comes from the political side, but the people as well. And therefore, if there is something that we feel really important, that a recommendation should go back to the government, and the government need to listen to us then.
Okay, thank you, Joan. Any other comments? Yeah, over here, Catherine.
Catherine Murray. I just want to get back to the point that Seamus made there a few moments ago about, I think, consulting the government, if I am correct, about our last two meetings as to what they feel might be discussed. I am under the opinion that we have already had a mandate from the government to have our 2 extra meetings, and I would feel very strongly that it's up to the convention to decide what matters should be discussed at those meetings. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, in fact, I think that I do think that's entirely right. That it is entirely up to ourselves to decide how we want to use our time at the next 2 meetings. That's, I think, quite clear. I think where Seamus's point probably comes in is that in the event that we clearly are only going to be able to discuss a certain number of items to a certain degree, if we were, if you like, prioritizing from, if you like, the 6 issues that we're talking about, if there was to be unfinished business, then I think all one can do would be express a view about the priority of that unfinished business. And where I think Seamus' point is relevant, well, ultimately it'll be up to the government to make a decision, if there were to be another convention, what the mandate and what the agenda for that convention would be. All right, at the back, is it somebody else? Is there somebody else here? Sorry, Gillian. Oh, sorry, I don't know. Were you looking for the mic or not? No, okay, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. If there are no further comments, sorry, one last comment. You did comment before, but okay.
John Lardner, just in terms of political reform, Dáil reform, Shannon reform, it's a huge area and we've limited time. I think one aspect I would personally like to see us concentrate on would be the office of the CNAG in terms of accountability in public office, in how our tax dollars are spent, that we get value for money. So the review of the whole thing is very large to take into account in 2 weekends, but to look at how the CNAG is progressing at the moment and how that can be given greater credence, that we do get accountability in all public office.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Just, we have a little moment. Is there any comment that any of the panel, either on my right or on my left, would like to make as a final word on the discussion that we've had there? David, you don't want to say anything, no?
Well, it's just pretty much what you were saying, I think, Tom, which is we need to talk in a lot of detail, I think, with the steering group about how best to proceed, because we have a choice between 6 big issues, but clearly there's choices within many of those issues as to which one or ones we want to prioritise. And as Tom was saying, it's an obvious point, isn't it, that if you have one or perhaps 2 issues, you can go into great depth. But if you have more than 2 issues, the likelihood is that you'll only be able to skim the surface of a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reality we're faced. So we will be back to you. I mean, in a way, this morning is a starting to your own thinking process. We'll progress that via some of the via the regional meetings. We'll talk to the steering group, and we will come back to you with, if you like, an agenda of choice, a menu of choice, and it'll be up to yourselves to fill in that menu. And on that basis, we will define our agenda for the 2 meetings in February. Okay. Well, now we come to the moment you've all been waiting for. It's the result of the vote, and the first question was, should reference to the offence of blasphemy in the Constitution be kept as it is? The answer, yes. Is it up? Yeah, you can read it then. Yes, 38%, no, 61%, 1%, no opinion. So there is a majority view that the reference should not be kept as it is. So constitutional change on that matter. The second question, in the event the Convention favours change to the Constitution, should the offence of blasphemy be removed altogether? 38%. Replaced with a new general provision to include incitement to religious hatred, 53%, and 9% undecided or no opinion. Question 3, should there be a legislative provision for the offence of blasphemy? Very evenly balanced here. Yes, 49%, no, 50%, and 1% no opinion. The final question, in the event that the Convention favours a legislative provision, it should be the existing legislative blasphemy provision, 11%, 82% in favour of a new set of detailed legislative provisions to include incitement to religious hatred, and 7% no opinion. So that is your decision, that is your recommendation as a convention, and no doubt there'll be much interpretation of that result, but as I say, the voice of the people has spoken, and thank you for that. I think it's just remaining to thank a number of people or groups of people. I do want to say before I do that, could you make sure to fill in your questionnaire? As always, it's of great value to us in helping us to learn from our proceedings. I do want to say a particular thanks to Ken Curtin at the back for his help in so many ways today and all the other days. And again, a particular thank you, I said it last night, but I want to say it again, to the facilitators and note takers who I think have done a splendid job in this. Yeah. And to the great people in the Secretariat who dressed up so imaginatively last night. And some of them went to bed unusually early, but anyway. But again, thank you to everybody for their, positive, spirited, and good-humoured participation over the weekend. Thanks very much.